In this lesson, we talk about the concept of proportion, and you can see the definition in the book. It says a proportion is an equation of the form A over B equals C over D. So basically, two fractions set equal to each other, and it says that B and D can't be zero because we cannot divide by zero. It says the proportion states two ratios or rates are equal. The proportion is read A is to B as C is to D. So when we look at these two things that we have here, you can see in the example problem going down the page, it says write each sentence as a proportion, and it says 3 is to 7 as 15 is to 35. And what you're going to do is you're going to put the first number on the top of the fraction, the second number on the bottom. The as is the equal sign, and then the first number in the second expression on the top, and the next number on the bottom. So if we look at the solution here for these, you can see that we have the 3 on the top, 3 is to 7 as 15 is to 35. So that's how we read that. Now, if you have words in these proportions, you want to make sure that you are consistent with them. So when I look at this one, it says 5 hits in 8 at-bats. So the top I have my 5 for hits, and the bottom I have my 8 at-bats. On the other side of the equal sign, if on the left side I have the hits on the top, the right side I need to have the hits on the top. So you can see 30 hits in 48 at-bats. So you need to make sure that you're consistent with these proportions. So you might want to pause the video for a minute and look at these examples and make sure you understand what I'm saying about that. So let's try another one and make sure we understand it. It says, write each sentence as a proportion. 5 is to 9 as 20 is to 36. So it's that easy. You don't need to reduce each side of the fraction because all we're doing is writing the two fractions as equal to each other. So if I were to reduce this fraction, I would actually get 5/9 anyway. So you just want to make sure that you're writing them with the equal sign between them. Number 2, 7 hits in 11 at-bats. So we want to make sure that we have the hits on the top. So 28 hits over 44 at-bats. Now, you want to be careful because sometimes the words may be switched around. So if this had said 44 at-bats in 28 hits, you would want to make sure that when you look at this proportion, since hits is on the top here, you would want to put the hits on the top here. So you want to pay attention to the words and don't just pounce on the first number that you see and put it on the top. If they have words with them, you want to make sure that you're consistent. So again, you might want to pause the video and pull up your book and make sure that you can actually do these problems. For the next set, we're trying to determine if these sets of fractions actually do make up a proportion. And we use the concept of cross products. And what we do is we cross multiply. And if the number is equal, then we know that it is a true proportion. So if I look at this one, what I do is I do 4 times the 28 and the 12 times the 9. So 4 times 28 is 112. And 9 times 12 is 108. So those two numbers are not equal to each other, which means no, this is not a proportion. So these questions are going to say, is this a proportion? And all you're doing is multiplying the numbers. If they're equal, it's a yes. If they're not equal, it's a no. The next kind of problem that you see will be actually solving proportions. And you're going to use that idea of the cross products in order to solve these proportions. So let's take a look at this example. If I have this example of x over 63 equals 4 over 7, we're going to assume that they are indeed equal to one another if they are proportions. So you're going to use the idea of the cross products, and you're going to go this side times this side, and anytime you have a variable times a number, it's just the number and the variable. And 63 times 4, which is 252. And your next step is going to always be to divide by the number sitting beside the variable. So 252 divided by 7 is 36. So we have solved that proportion. So what I want you to do is pause the video, pull up your book, and see if you can do these two problems. So here are your solutions to those two problems. The only ones that I think you might have a little trouble with are the ones that may have fractions in them. So if we were going to try to solve this one, we would have 2/3 over 4 equals x over 7. And if we use our cross products, we can see we would have 2/3 times 7 and 4 times x. Now, a lot of you are okay with fractions, but some of you have trouble with math just because of the fractions. So I'm going to pull up the two calculators so that you can see how to do this. So if I were to pull up the smaller of the two calculators, and I do my 2/3 times 7, you do have a fraction key right here, and then the one up above it is the mixed number key. So if I click on that one for the smaller calculator, all I need to do is use the arrows to make sure that I have the numbers that form the fraction in place. So that would be my 2/3 times 7, and I would hit enter and it would give me 14/3. So if we go back to our piece of paper, we would have 14/3 right here and 4x here. And if I needed to divide both sides by 4, I could go back to my calculator and I have my 14/3 there. So 14/3 divided by 4, and I hit enter and it gives it to me as a fraction, a top-heavy fraction, which is fine. There are buttons on the calculator that will change these things if you need them in a different format. So on this particular calculator, you can see up here where you have the fraction to a mixed number. So if I want it as a mixed number, I would hit second and then access this and hit enter, and it would give me the mixed number. If I wanted it as a decimal, I would hit this one and it would give it to me as a decimal. If you happen to have the TI 8384 series, let me try to pull that one up. So on this one, in order to do fractions, you have to use the division symbol to get your fraction. So that's going to be your 2/3. And then I usually hit enter after I put a fraction in there. And then times the 7. So we're working on that same problem. Enter, and then divided by the 4, and it gives it to you as a decimal. If you want it in another format, you have to hit math, and then you'll see fraction there, and then enter, enter, and it will give it to you as a top-heavy fraction. If you want it as a mixed number, this calculator is a little more complicated, so we're going to go back up to, let's go back up and do our math again. So 2/3 times 7 divided by 4. So let's say we want this as a mixed number instead of as a top-heavy fraction. The way you're going to have to do this is you're going to need to remember that it has a 1 in the front of it. So that's going to be, your answer is going to be 1 and something. So what you're going to do is you're going to subtract the 1 off of it to be left with the decimal part of it, and then you're going to hit the math, enter, enter. So if I needed a mixed number for this one, the calculator now gives me the 1/6. I would remember that I already had the 1, and that's how I would get the 1/6 out of that. So that's how this particular calculator works. One thing too that I need to make sure that you understand on this particular calculator, some of the operating systems will be updated so that you will be able to enter mixed numbers a little easier. But for a lot of things on this calculator, let's say I had 1 and 1/6 and that was the thing that I was using for my math. The way you enter it on this calculator is you do 1 plus and then 1 divided by 6. So I just wanted to make sure that you had that there so that if you were trying to enter that on that calculator, that's what you would do. If you need to enter it on the smaller calculator, you simply access the mixed number key and you put your 1 and 1/6 in there, and you just make sure that your numbers are in the correct place on the calculator. So this one's a little bit easier to use if you have trouble with fractions. Now, going into applications for the proportions, the trick here is just to make sure that you are keeping things consistent. So let's take a look at this one. It says pediatricians prescribe 5 milliliters of acetaminophen for every 25 pounds of a child's weight. How many milliliters will the doctor prescribe for Amelia, who weighs 60 pounds? So you want to make sure that you're keeping your proportion consistent. So if I put the 5 on top on one side and the pounds on the bottom, on the other side I will need to put the milliliters, which I don't know, and I'll need to put the pounds on the bottom. And then you simply solve them just like we did the others. So once you get them set up, they're not going to be difficult. So I would need to divide by 25. So I would get x is 12. So that would mean that I would need 12 milliliters for this child who weighs 60 pounds. Let's look at another one. This one says one brand of microwave popcorn has 120 calories per serving. A whole bag has 3.5 servings. How many calories are in the whole bag? So if we put the calories on the top and we put for one serving, we want to know the calories over here for 3.5 servings. So we would do 120 times 3.5, which is 420, equals 1 times x, and we divide by the 1, so we would have 420 calories. So that's how that works. This is a great application if you were trying to, let's say, change recipes so that you had different kinds of servings. So let's go back to a clean piece of paper here. Let's suppose you had a recipe, and in the recipe said that it provided for 8 servings, and you had 2/3 of a cup of sugar. And you wanted to change it so that for your recipe, it did 10 servings instead of 8 servings. So you would say something like 2/3 of a cup of sugar is for 8 servings, as how much sugar is for 10 servings. And you would have a proportion, and you would take your calculator and do your 2/3 times 10. And on my calculator, that would give me 20 over 3. And 8 times x is 8x. So then I would take my calculator and divide both sides by 8. So I would do 20 over 3 divided by 8. And I would get 5/6. So for my recipe, if I wanted 10 servings, I would need 5/6 of a cup of sugar. So that's an application for this type of thing.